Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the FSBPT Regulatory Hour with Dale Atkinson. Today's topic is regulatory awareness, board communications, and outreach. I'm your host, Adrienne, aka Stacy Price, and I'm one of the FSBPT board members. As Dale thrives on engagement and interaction, we ask that you please be prepared to chime in through the chat or by unmuting yourselves to offer comments wherever prompted. As much as we want you to learn from Dale, we also can benefit from what questions you have or comments that you might want to share. So now, without further ado, I will return things over to Dale.
Stacy, thank you so much for that introduction. I can see you. Stacy, can you see the PowerPoint?
I can.
All right, excellent. So again, thank you for that introduction. And I will at least start off by emphasizing, if you all have something to say or would like to place something into the chat, please feel free to do that at any point in time during my remarks. And I agree that your networking is equally as important as a presenter's verbal explanations of matters, and so please take advantage of that. I will get my PowerPoint slides moving here. I do want to start out as I do for those of you who are regulars on this or have seen me speak. I always do want to say a sincere thank you to all those involved in this entire process, not only of putting on these regulatory hours, but the operations and programs of your organization, FSBPT. So a big shout out, thank you to the board of directors of FSBPT for allowing these programs to happen. A big shout out to the FSBPT staff, Rich and Jeff and the whole crew there that operationalize these opportunities for all of you to interact with each other. And the biggest shout out, thanks goes to each and every one of you on the line today for the important role you play in regulation and public protection. Whether you're a volunteer board member, an administrator, executive director, staff of a board, assistant AG, inspector, or other role that you may play, you are not thanked in the regulatory community enough. And so I will reach out and say thank you as we get going with today's session. I will also start to emphasize that this topic of awareness, communication, outreach, and others is probably, in my opinion, one of the most perhaps overlooked topics that regulatory boards have. And by way of continued introduction, I represent a whole bunch of FSBPT-like organizations who are involved in providing programs and services that lessen burdens on state governments. And so, and I've been doing this my entire career, 38 plus years. And so hopefully some of that experience is beneficial. But I have talked about these outreach issues and attempts to ensure that we demystify the regulatory community for years and years and years. So that's what today's topic will cover. And I'm hoping that between my remarks and your remarks that we will uncover or unveil or come up with some good ideas for some of these outreach efforts. So type them in the chat when you think of something. We can all benefit from your participation. So first off, regulators are cool. Thank you, but regulators are definitely cool. Winter is coming. And so feel free to type into the chat. I want to make sure you all are listening. What your, if you will, sport or activity of choice in the winter is. That includes, by the way, sitting by the fire. Nothing wrong with that. So we got some skiers and some curling and traveling and all of that. So keep those hockey go Blue Jackets. Well done. Well done. And as you all probably have learned over the course of time with me, anytime you want to talk about hockey, you're in the club here. In that circle of trust, if you will. So keep those participatory issues coming. As mentioned, I'm Dale Atkinson. I'm an attorney outside of Chicago. While we're at this and are chatting, somebody chat who that is, the picture is. That's not really me. But we can make sure that you're listening, paying attention, and others. I described myself just a little bit. And as mentioned, I'm an attorney in private practice, and I provide legal advice to a lot of FSBPT-like clients. So I hope you find that beneficial. Now, to get us going, I've already mentioned that this awareness and outreach communications is probably an overlooked topic, and that we're looking to demystify regulatory boards and what it is that they do. So the goal of my remarks today is to provide ideas to help in promoting outreach and communications by your boards. And this is not an easy task. We know it's easy to communicate with some and perhaps not others, but how do we get the word out related to the regulatory boards and the important role that you play in public protection and carrying out the intent of the legislation? And with each slide, I'll throw in an idea, but certainly it doesn't preclude many other ideas. And as you think of them, chat them and place them in the chats and help us all out. So we'll focus on this and move forward. Now, with all due respect to everybody on the line, probably the biggest weakness that I see in the regulatory community is this topic. First off, it's not talked about very much. And secondly, I think many boards focus on, and by the way, rightfully so, but they focus on the licensees, those that are seeking licensure, applicants, those that have licenses, those that are renewing licenses, those that are perhaps under the adverse action or enforcement mechanisms as respondents, and you focus on each other as regulators. And there's a gigantic segment of society, from consumers right on through to everyone else you can think of, that probably should have a better understanding of what it is that you do as regulators, and again, how best can we fulfill some of those obligations and those needs or those voids. So take this to heart. Maybe some of these will work for you, maybe they won't. And I also want to, as kind of an introductory remark, identify that depending upon the governance structure within your jurisdiction, you may or may not be able to effectuate some of these ideas we throw out there. So standalone boards, composite boards, departmentalized jurisdictions, I know that they exist. And I understand that some of the suggestions that I will make and that you might make to each other may not be as operationalized quite as easily in your jurisdiction as perhaps others. So I do take that to heart. But again, you can still be a stimulus behind perhaps making some of these strides and these movements via your board, regardless of the governance structure that may exist. So the first thing I'll start with is our board minutes. We could do an entire seminar on board minutes and how to write them, what it is they do, why you have them, ideas for making them quite as efficient as possible, number one. But it is so important that you understand that the eyes of the world to your boards can be via the minutes themselves. I read a lot of board minutes, and some of them are really, really hard to read. Some of them are very poorly written, and they don't paint the picture that perhaps I might suggest that you want to paint for every single board meeting. So this is your ticket to outreach, is ensuring that your minutes are well drafted. Now, the lawyers on the line, if there are lawyers on the line, or if you're consulting with, which you should, by the way, you should consult with your lawyers related to, if you will, legal questions that surface. But get some advice on these minutes. Look at your past practice, but then look at tomorrow and think, what can we do to best serve and reflect the accuracy of what occurred during the board meeting itself? You write down every word that's going to be said. Do you paraphrase? Do you attribute thoughts to individual board members? There are so many ways to look at this, and some are perhaps appropriate and some may not be quite as appropriate. But think about these minutes as as the eye to the world into your board business. And because your board meetings are probably not well attended, this is an important aspect of reflecting what it is your board does and perhaps why it does it. Now, this so ask yourself what information should be in these board meeting minutes. And if anybody can paraphrase that in the chats or wants to unmute, feel free to do that. But what information is in the minutes? And then I might also ask what information should be in all board meeting minutes. And should doesn't necessarily always mean that it is occurring. So think about that for a minute. When you read your board meetings, your board meeting minutes, what story does it tell, if you will? And I don't mean story in the way of fiction. I just mean, does it accurately reflect what the board did in itself? So how each board member votes, those in attendance. So you're thinking of ideas now, and I think it's wise to make a list of those ideas. And this surprise picture is in here because there may be some that sit up and say, whoa, can we really do that? So just take a look at this list add to it, subtract from it. You could probably think of many, many more things, but the composition of the board itself determines if there are any vacancies. I'll stop on vacancies. I spent the last couple of weeks attending annual meetings with my clients, and we focused on a few of my sessions on the vacancy issue. And you may have vacancies on your board, and we all understand that those vacancies can cause issues related to the board's ability to do business. So is there a way to keep the pressure, if you will, on the executive branch of government to appoint and fill those vacancies? My clients now are moving toward their Model X to say that a vacancy that's not filled within a certain period of time, let's say 12 months, is then filled by the board itself. So these are ideas, but this is why the reason I'm explaining all that is because if vacancies are placed in the minutes, it's telling the world that we have a vacancy. We might have 2 vacancies, and I might put in there that the vacancy has been in existence since July of 2022 or whatever it might be, accurately, by the way. The mission, vision, strategic plan, somehow do you tell the world at the start of every meeting about your mission and vision? Do you even have a mission or vision, which you should, and it should be front and center. So I just see a chat in here. We're down 3 board members. So look at that. I mean, think about that. And that should be reflected in the minutes. So you're telling the world that, and you keep, if you will, the pressure on resolving those issues to the best you possibly can. So thank you, Mindy, for that comment. So the mission, vision, and strategic plan. Do you have one? Do you know it? Can you recite it? Can all of your board members recite it? Read it into the record for a couple of reasons. One is you tell the world that you know why you're in existence as a regulatory board. We are here to, and fulfill and finish that sentence, whatever your mission statement says. And the mission statement should say something along the lines of carry out the intent of the legislation by regulating the profession of physical therapy and physical therapy assistance in the interest of public protection. And the more you say that, 1, the better you're going to get at saying it. 2 is you're telling the world that you know why you're in existence. And 3 is, by the way, and perhaps most importantly, you're reminding your fellow board members why they are there. And I don't believe necessarily that the public protection and separation of trade from regulation is emphasized enough. Here is your opportunity. And by the way, this long list of things here could probably be done in a matter of minutes, if you will, or at least a relatively short period of time. I'm not suggesting you add hours onto your meeting by doing this, but if you just get used to it, and every set of minutes from a board meeting has all these, it tells the story. When I read them, it tells me that you know where you're heading, what you're doing, et cetera. So mission, vision, strategic plan are some way to reflect that you as a board understand the big picture issues. Citation of statutes and rules, et cetera, for noticing of the meeting and for your existence. Others could be done pretty quickly. Relevant reference to policies as needed from the standpoint of anything that needs to be made of record, whether it's we meet quarterly, we meet monthly, pursuant to policy, whatever you need to say to kind of tie this up and act as reminders, as I've mentioned, to not only board members, but those in attendance. Notation of last meeting minutes. And then we get into these middle set of bullet points there. Annual applications, the number of granted, number denied, average time from submission to completion, and how many remain pending. What a great statistic that is to see at every single board meeting, so that you can decide right there on the spot, well, gee, why is it taking so long to process applications? Or you congratulate your staff because the efficiency levels are so high, you're processing those applications in a timely manner. Same thing with renewals or otherwise. And so you see that next bullet is renewals. How many are granted, denied, average time, how many remain pending? Perhaps a summary of why those remain pending. Going back up to the applications for initial licensure, as they remain pending because they're incomplete. Great, you've read something into the record. We have 15 incomplete applications. We have yet to receive transcripts. Something that you're going to say that I'm going to read as an outsider that understands the efficiencies of your board and then ultimately draws conclusions related to the effectiveness of your board. Next bullet, annual complaints, the number resolved, average time to resolution, the number that remain pending. Again, important information, not only for the outside world reading your minutes, but for yourselves. Gee, there are a lot of complaints still pending, or we have no complaints. Whatever the case might be, It's important to put it into the record. And I think if you follow this for every meeting, even if you do have no complaints, you can say that into the record. Number of phone calls, if it's easy to track, and I know the administrators are probably scratching their heads here, do we really need to or want to do this? It may be a good idea, and it probably is easier than you think to track this, but the number of phone calls to the board office, the number of hits to the website, first time hits to the website, how long they stay on the website, where they matriculate around into the website itself, whatever it is you think is important. How cool would that be to read that and hear it and have your board members hear it from the staff as a tracking system? Newsletters, outreach, visits to boards, meetings with legislators or committees. You can figure out a lot more that might make their way into specific board meetings if they're relevant. But in general, perhaps this is an approach that will make your meeting minutes accurately reflect not only what went on, but just a reminder that you know what you're doing. So I've emphasized that enough, but I really pause here to suggest that you think about some process to incorporate this into the minutes itself. Now, you may record your meetings, you may videotape your meetings, you may streamline your meetings, whatever it takes to best reflect what happens at the board meeting. I've been asking assistant AGs now for quite some time is if you record your meeting, can't the recording be the minutes? It truly is an accurate reflection of what went on. And I'm a little bit cautious about someone keeping notes that says that was important, I'm going to write it down, and that wasn't important, I guess I don't need to write that down. It's not the easiest task to undertake. And those that have decision-making power, to take minutes and participate in a meeting at the same time is really difficult to meaningfully participate. So think about the best way to pull this together. Here's some ideas. Your outreach to the world and people like me that read your minutes, I think can be an important potential change that you have. Your websites. Next up, I visit a lot of websites, ask to my staff here in the office, and boy, it is hard to find things on some websites. And I'm going to go back and emphasize that I understand you may not be in control of how to change your website, but boy, I'll tell you, if it's hard to navigate the website and you are not in control as a board, can you talk to those that are in control and effectuate some change? And your effectuating of change may help other boards, by the way, within your jurisdiction, if they're all built on a similar platform and they're difficult to navigate. I have trouble finding things, and I know what I'm looking for. Imagine what the public, if you will, imagine the difficulties they may have to find information that is otherwise public and perhaps rightfully within the realm of what they should be looking for. I'm also suggesting the more robust your website, perhaps the less phone calls you might get, and you create some added efficiencies that exist there. So to the extent that you can improve that website, or if you think it needs it, do it. And I will use adverse actions, final adverse actions that, by the way, should be public, and the difficulty in finding them. If I don't know the practitioner's name or license number, maybe I'll never find it. And when I'm looking at your websites, I'm looking for information to give presentations on, legal matters that were resolved that we all will benefit by talking about them, whether they were in favor for what the board did or against what the board did. That's how we learn. Your websites can be an important look into the operations of the board itself. Now, I threw in an article here that is from July of 2023, and the title of the article is State Dental Review Board Bears Few Teeth. This is obviously critical of the dental board. And you can see there, if you just read the couple of bullet points I've put in there, details about problem dentists are hidden under layers of bureaucracy, a tangled complaint system, and a virtually unnavigable website. So this is the example of this. Now, the dentists that were written about in this case engaged in procedures involving children, both involved also an anesthesiologist, and 2 children died in the same office. And I believe, if I recall correctly from this article, other patients had died as well. And the dentist here, was placed on probation and allowed to continue to practice. while the anesthesiologist was subject to some discipline. But the point of this is the media's now outreach and their communications with the rest of the world that is critical of the regulatory community. And you can find these articles all over the place if you look. So this is just one example. The second bullet, you can see there, in rare instances when patients die or are seriously injured, the board does little to hold them accountable. And this is what people are going to read. And how can we best, you, the regulatory community, best do outreach to ensure that, one, perhaps these are accurate, but two is that there is a way to see what it is your boards do. We'll identify some of these ideas as well. So now that you're warmed up on the the chat feature, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think consumers know about physical therapy regulatory boards? 1 being low, 10 being high. And I see a 1 there that almost looked like a -1. And and I agree. I think the consuming public knows very little about the regulatory community. Now, can you do something about it? That's a tough question. And you probably have limited opportunities. I myself am in favor of what I would call a patient or consumer bill of rights. Okay. And that consumer bill of rights would say that when a professional relationship is established, I am going to have you as my patient sign something that tells what it is to expect out of me and what I expect out of you. It might have issues related to timeliness, billing, calls or after hours calls, whatever it takes to identify. But in that patient bill of rights will be, I am regulated by a board. This is how you contact that board if you have any questions. And I realize that there are those who will say that's not a good way to start off a professional relationship. Perhaps not. Can we afford to do it from the standpoint of the relationship itself? Or can we afford not to do it? But maybe that's one way to get information out to consumers so that they understand going into the relationship what to expect and that there is a regulatory process that would hear them in the event of alleged, if you will, wrongdoing. Now, when I say all this, I'm not afraid of frivolous complaints. Frivolous complaints will be handled and they will be dealt with when received. And it's usually pretty obvious when a complaint is frivolous. It's about a fee dispute or something else. And the board says that's outside of our jurisdiction. So, or authority as well. So I don't do this to encourage complaints. I do this to raise the level of awareness of consumers themselves. So think about at least a couple of those ideas and how that might come into play related to that. Now, I asked the same question. We're not going to answer all of these, but I asked the same question about all of these, and you could think of some more, by the way, too. And that is, what do applicants know about the board? What do licensees know about the board? Legislators, executive branch, academics, the media, even yourselves, board members. How informed are you as a regulatory board member? Because it's a new role, and it's not an easy role, by the way. So I don't say that. I say this critically, but I don't say this as a mechanism of, if you will, challenging and putting board members, criticizing board members in a negative, if you will, way. What do other regulatory boards know about your board? And what about the FSBPT member boards themselves? So think about the same question. We're going to go through each of these. Now, what I have chosen to do here is identify each of these bullet points with one suggested, if you will, operationalized thing that you could maybe do as a board itself. There are probably many, I'm sure there are many more that exist. And so feel free to write any of those down. And by the way, these slides are available to you via FSBPT if you choose to look at them after the fact. So let's start with applicants. Okay, applicants for licensure themselves. Do they even know the board exists? I just came from a meeting over last weekend where, and this is not news to me, but where what was being discussed is graduates of the academic programs don't know they have to get licensed in order to lawfully engage in the practice. So you can imagine what professions might we be talking about, and it doesn't really matter. Are they aware? What do applicants know? One, about do they have to be licensed? And two is, well, what is the role of the board, the regulatory board itself? And believe me, most of the world probably thinks you all are behind closed doors, churning up ways to rough up licensees, okay? Which of course is not the truth. And you're all human beings and you are acting within the scope of your authority, fulfilling the intent of the legislation by regulating. And you're doing as a group in group decision-making process what you feel is the right thing, okay? So what can we do with the applicants now, right? So I would suggest that you take your board meetings to the schools, move them around the state, don't always have them in the same place. And I realize some of you may be meeting virtually and otherwise. So if there's a way to figure this out where you have a physical presence and maybe some board members are on virtually, you could still do this at the schools and invite students or have the faculty or the administration of the educational program ensure that students are made aware of this and can attend your board meeting. How cool would that be if the students watched you all in action, right? Now, when you do this, remember that you are being watched in action. And so what I like about moving your meetings around and taking them other places, it kind of makes you all sit up straight as board members, right? And that you take on at least enough formalness to ensure that you follow the rules. If nobody is there, how many corners do you cut and otherwise? So I really like to see your board meetings somewhat formalized. It doesn't mean over formalized, but it allows these students to see you, ask questions perhaps, have a forum at the end about what is it that this board does? And when that you're asked that question, you should be good at giving that answer. And so provide these opportunities to these applicants. These are wannabe licensees, and they should see you in action. Now, if I were running an accrediting body, and I do represent some accrediting bodies, but if I were writing accreditation standards in any profession, I would say that all students have to attend at least one regulatory board meeting for their profession where they're heading to be a physical therapist, assistant, or any other profession, that you have to attend one board meeting before you graduate. And with virtual attendance, it's a whole lot easier now than it used to be. So perhaps the academic community can help stimulate these outreach efforts by, one, being supportive of licensure, but two is allowing you to bring your board meetings to the schools, the education programs, and promoting them so that there is attendance by students. So if anybody's done that, feel free to write that into the comments or unmute and tell us about it. And if it's worked, I did see my chats are scrolling past. I did see very, very effective. So I'm kind of assuming they were talking about the quality of the speaker right now, and I'm hoping you're laughing. But certainly, if you all have something to say about that and the effectiveness, let us know. So next up are licensees. And I might put licensees in somewhat of a similar category to the applicants. How much do licensees know about the boards? If they've come out of the program, never attended a board meeting, they're probably, you as board members and as regulatory boards are probably as mysterious as you are to the applicants, as the students. And otherwise, once again, concerns over your role is to churn up ways to get licensees, if you will, in trouble. Okay, so what I would suggest is free CE. And you can think of way more examples than this, but like I said, I've chosen one for each of these categories. Free CE. Attend the meeting. You're going to get continuing education credit for whatever hours you think is appropriate. You as a board probably have the right to do that without a lot of legislative frustrations, but encourage licensees to attend the meetings by giving them continuing education toward that renewal process. And secondly, I will say that attending your board meeting is extremely beneficial to those licensees. It's not always about modalities of practice and improving yourselves as a practitioner. It can also be improving yourself as a licensee who is aware of overlapping scopes, who is aware of what the board does, who is aware of what other boards do, who is aware of what it takes to receive and renew a license, or anything else that might come up. And maybe most importantly, licensees attending will see the respondents and the adverse actions that you may be taking against other practitioners, and it might educate those licensees about what can go wrong in the practice and deter either conduct or improve conduct so that it doesn't result in complaint and an adverse action. So licensees attending your meetings, equally as important as applicants attending your meetings. And as you will figure out, I want your meeting rooms to be full. I want all sorts of people there for all the reasons I've already said, but it gets the word out. You all sit up straight. You run your meetings in a professional manner and a somewhat formal manner without over formalizing. So how important can that be? So the licensees themselves from that, and I see some more chats coming up referencing associations, chapters from alliances and others. So that's and I think that is where the point was, but the chat went by me. But the point being is that can the trades help you with this? Can the state chapters of the trade associations promote your meetings and promote their their membership to attend your board meetings as licensees? So there's so many ways, I think, to get this word out and improve and demystify this. Now, where I find that most boards that
How'd you do it?
Yeah, somebody have something to say? Somebody's unmuted, so we're going to be able to hear you if you talk. So, and no problem if you want to say something. So where I believe boards are most reluctant to act is dealing with the legislature. And that says legislators, but it could be committees, it could be the legislature in general or individual legislators. And while most boards are prohibited from lobbying, that does not prohibit you from being an information source to the legislature. So questions may be asked. You may receive information about pending legislation that's introduced. And there's nothing worse than legislation passing, getting signed into law, and your board doesn't even, that affects your board and you don't even know about it. And all of a sudden it's there sitting in front of you saying, we've now moved from 36 hours of CE every 2 years to 40 hours or whatever it might be. And that may be a simplistic example, and there's a lot more, of course, going on. So be an information source as a board and forge relationships with the legislatures and otherwise. Now, how do you do that? Obviously, that can be difficult, but I'm going to invite them to your meetings. I would send out, if I were running a board, building it from the ground up, I would send an invitation to the executive branch of government, selected legislators or committees of the legislature. I would send them an invitation to every meeting saying, we're meeting on this date. Here's attached is the agenda or the draft agenda, whatever you need to say that's accurate. And we hope to see you there because we know what we're doing and we want you to see us in action. Something along the lines there. It's obviously going to be written a little different than that, but invite them to the meetings. Now, when they don't show up after the meeting, once the minutes have been formally approved, follow-up letter, we missed you at the meeting. Attached are the minutes from that last meeting. We hope to see you at a future board meeting. You're getting the word out. But most importantly, you can go all the way back to my slide on the minutes. If your minutes are well drafted, you're telling the world you know what you're doing. And you're pushing that information out to those to whom you are accountable. Everybody on the line, I'm sure knows, and that is you exist because legislation was enacted that created and delegated authority to your board to act. And that act is force the law regulating the profession in the interest of public protection, however you phrase that. And it's important for these legislators to know you know that. So when I ask board members, what do boards do? And I get a long-winded answer on everything, which is, by the way, accurate. I might say, it's easy to say, what we do as a regulatory board, as a physical therapy regulatory board, we carry out the intent of the legislation, period. Well, how do you do that? Well, now I'll give that long answer. And that may be that kind of an answer may be especially important if you're talking to these legislators. And I would start out that meeting all the way back to those minutes and hoping the legislators are in the audience. I would start it out by reminding everybody, this is what we do. We carry out the intent of the legislation and then take it from there. So inviting legislators to the meetings, hoping they show up. If they don't, when they don't, follow up with them with minutes and perhaps a future invitation to another board meeting itself. And I can see a couple more comments. I'm assuming everybody's following these comments, so they've zipped by me. So as they are relevant, please, staff from FSBPT, interrupt if you need to read one. And everyone on the line today, read these comments, because this is your thought process, and this is as important as what I say. This is important what you say to each other. So keep that in mind. Now, back to the legislators just very quickly. What I am suggesting to my clients is that their Model Acts, you all have a Model Act, most all of my clients have a Model Act, is that something be said along the lines of what's written on the screen here. All material amendments to the Practice Act must be presented to the relevant board for comment prior to enactment. Doesn't mean the legislature have to follow it, but they ought to be speaking to the experts. You're the experts. This is why you're on the board, whether you are a licensee or a public member, you are the experts. The legislature should come to you and say, we're thinking about this material change to the Practice Act. Is this a good idea? They should solicit your advice. It's not lobbying. Now you're going to tell them this is a great idea. We need authority over unlicensed practice. And in the world of technology, this is very important. Legislator, thank you. This is a great idea. We would support it fully and be able to enforce it in the event it was enacted. You're going to get some kind of an answer along those lines. You may say this is a horrible idea because it's tying our hands, it's limiting our budgets, or we don't have enough investigators. Wherever it falls, the legislator ought to be interested in what your opinion is about material changes to the Practice Act. And perhaps you can legislate so that you do receive notice of these proposed amendments prior to their enactment, and your input can be sought. So that's, again, a very important point that exists. Executive branch of government. I've already talked about inviting to the meetings, and so I would also invite the governor or the governor's representative to each of your meetings. But since I already used that one up earlier, I could have put it here, but I put the following is report to the executive branch before and after each meeting. And by the way, I could add to this, file an annual report with the executive branch of government, whether you are required to under a sunset provision or not. Well-drafted minutes every meeting throughout the year, however often you meet, a nice introduction, all the minutes included, and a nice conclusion. Here you go, executive branch. Thank you for appointing us. We are serving the public well and in an effective and efficient manner. Please see a copy of the attached report and call us with any questions. We look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. So report, and you could do this again before and after each meeting. You could do this perhaps at the end of the year or both. Even if you don't have to do it anyway. And again, it is identifying the knowledge that you have and the fulfillment of your responsibilities as a regulatory board. So this kind of contact, I think, can be extremely important to communications and outreach and forging relationships with both the legislative and executive branches of government. So what about academics, the academic community? What can we do, you as regulatory community, to best, if you will, communicate and have outreach to the academic community? And I might suggest that you share otherwise public exam data available via FSBPT. All of my clients, the academic community and the exam, which by the way are very separate. So let's start quickly with some fundamental issues that are not understood by that many folk, especially legislators, is that a licensure exam is not a capstone to the education, okay, period. So that's, they serve very different purposes, and that's a lecture in and of itself. But understanding that, the academic community is very interested in the performance of their graduates on the licensure exams, and it may be an accreditation standard in addition. So providing relevant, otherwise, if you will, public exam data can help in setting curricula and others to ensure that these students not only receive that education for lifelong learning, but are also enhanced in their success rates on a licensure exam. It happens all the time. All the professions talk about this, and the academic community sometimes wants more and more information. Well, let's give them information that is, again, otherwise public, like content areas on the examinations themselves. This is going to be an important point in developing a curriculum. Again, I'm emphasizing otherwise public because there's a whole lot of confidentiality built around exam programs. Most of my clients develop, administer, score, and maintain uniform licensure exams, and I understand the need for confidentiality, intellectual property interests, and security. But at the same time, there is some information that can be made available. So there's an outreach effort via your organization, FSBPT, perhaps that can enhance some of the information that is provided to the outside world, or perhaps specifically the academic community. And I'm going to say the word academician just because it's one of my favorite words, and I like to say it because it sounds good. All right. Now, the media. What role does the media play? We saw an article earlier, and most of the time the role of the media is to be a disruptor and to report on negative things and raise that level of awareness. And you don't see any reports that I can find, any articles that I can find that that applaud the boards themselves, regulatory boards, and recognizing the volunteerism of those serving on the boards themselves and the difficult job that they have, the responsibilities. So how do we do that? Can we do that? Is that even reasonable? So how do we encourage that? I have trouble with figuring out what can I put in this slide that says, well, what do you do with the media? Well, again, I'd invite the media. I want them at the meetings. And I want them to see you in action, and I want them to write a positive article, and perhaps you forge a relationship with the media that can encourage somewhat of this positive article. Somebody just typed in develop a buddy in the media so you can feed them info. Here you go. Now, when you say feed them info, be a little careful about being a spokesperson for the board itself, but the intent here is a good one. And how do you forge that relationships? Just like you forge the relationships with the executive branch, with the legislatures, and we've already talked about applicants and licensees and the academic community. So how do you forge those relationships? Well, first get them to the meetings and let them see you in action. And then perhaps a positive article will come out of that identifies volunteerism and the importance of regulation. And it's not just all about negatives, barriers, the inefficiencies of government and otherwise. So perhaps that can happen. And I encourage that. I hope it happens before my time is up. So we asked the same question, by the way, of board members. Okay, how much do you know about the regulatory community, the community that you are in? And new board members, this is a new experience. This is not an easy, if you will, transition, or it's not an easy, maybe transition isn't the best word. It's not easy to develop the mindset of a regulator because you might be, and most likely are, a licensee. And the same, by the way, applies to public membership. Recognize that. How do you say, I am here to enforce the Practice Act, carry out the intent of the legislation when I'm a licensee? And there is a mistrust overall between some legislators and the boards themselves, the agencies that have been created by them, because of what may be perceived as self-regulation. I don't believe any of the professions in the US are self-regulated, nor is physical therapy or physical therapy assistants. You happen to have experts serving on the boards to provide effectiveness and efficiencies to the process. And that's the answer to that. So how much do your board members know about their roles and responsibilities as serving on a state board itself? Board members should be encouraged to attend and participate in the FSBPT activities, training programs, annual meetings, regulatory hours, or anything else that you can think of. And what's interesting is the veteran board members, and I attend a ton of board meetings, board of director meetings. I also attend a ton of annual meetings, educational meetings, committee meetings, and otherwise for my clients. And who attends those are generally those veteran board members. They've been on the board for a bit. And I can see why. That makes sense to me. But bring along a new board member. Allow that new board member to be exposed to the programs and services of your organization, FSBPT. Allow them to be exposed to other jurisdictions. Allow them to be exposed to the process of volunteering to FSBPT, see the programs in action, participate, debate resolutions, vote on bylaw amendments, whatever it might be that comes up so that there is this understanding of the collective knowledge of your profession and the regulation of it via your organization, FSBPT. So hopefully this will encourage boards to not only bring multiple folks, say, to the annual meeting as an example. And by the way, I'm not touting the annual meetings as any benefit to me. It's a benefit to those who attend it, and it's your organization. So attending those meetings, networking with others, and seeing FSBPT and the regulatory community in action as well. So participating in these activities, and like I say, including these webinars, and FSBPT also has some board member trainings on an annual basis. So learn about it, share that with your new board members, and see if they can become involved and if they have an interest as well. Excuse me. Now, other regulatory boards I've been promoting for a long time is that your board, let's say, your state board of physical therapy, stimulate combined board meetings. So take professions that you think are relevant to the world of physical therapy. And that could be chiropractic, it could be veterinary medicine, it could be perhaps acupuncture, occupational therapy. You can think of more than I could. And be the stimulus behind joint board meetings intra-state. So within your jurisdiction, you have, and these are going to be open meetings, open to the public, fine. But if you stimulate it, you are the one that's so-called in control of the agenda. And I don't say that in a manipulative sort of way, but you can get out under the table what you think is important. And you start to identify commonalities and differences. You start to identify overlapping scopes or otherwise, so that you can perhaps have these kinds of discussions and then collectively come up with, hey, we need to change certain legislation. We need to see to it, if possible, without violating lobbying statutes, that the legislature is stimulated to clarify something within the statutes of either your Practice Act or perhaps that related profession. If nothing more, you're communicating with each other, and you might identify efficiencies of application processing, inefficiencies of renewals, rulemaking, whatever you can think of. The more you sit down with other boards, the less echo chamber you have of all physical therapy and physical therapy assistant issues. Stimulate meetings with other boards themselves. And I forgot to hit the advanced slide. So enough said there, and encourage these joint intrastate board meetings. And so-called lastly, if you will, the FSBPT member boards and the roles that they play, okay? And FSBPT, it's incumbent upon you as an organization via your participation through the staff and others of your organization is to have robust education sessions and training opportunities. Now you can see my self-serving statement, invite that great presenter and all-around good guy, Dale. You're supposed to laugh, so I'm hoping there's a smile or two coming out of there. Promote robust educational sessions. Participate in, if you will, participate in the planning of your upcoming annual meetings or these webinars. Hey, I have a great idea for a topic, for a webinar, for a regulatory hour. Send it in to Jeff. And perhaps that can be, again, the next topic that is talked about at a regulatory hour. Same thing as I have a great topic and I'm willing to present on it at the annual meeting. Send that in so your planning committees have an opportunity to consider what it is important to its membership in developing agendas for both annual meetings, educational meetings, even development of committees through the board of directors or otherwise. So take advantage of these, not only by attending, but by assisting in providing topics and subject matter to your office, FSBPT, to perhaps place onto agendas where appropriate. And this, I've seen this in action. And when you get 15 emails with good topics brought up, boy, you really have now a reason to set up your annual meeting in a manner that achieves and meets the needs of the membership because they brought it up. I see volunteer. So excellent. That's also another way to get involved. And all the organizations I represent, FSBPT is no exception, relies heavily on its volunteers, and a big thank you to each of those volunteers. So So, best ideas ever, right? Just hope somebody wants to type that in there. And I'm hoping that these ideas and this type of an approach will provide you with outreach opportunities that start to demystify the regulatory community. Physical therapy is not alone in this issue. And I speak on this topic pretty regularly now in all the professions. And if intrastate you can band together, you'll come up with some good ideas to hold either training sessions, to hold joint meetings, or to have outreach programs, or to deal with unlicensed practice issues jointly with other boards within your jurisdiction to ensure that the public sees a billboard that says, hey, is your physical therapist licensed? Make sure you check, or whatever it is that you can come up with. There's some great ideas, and if you band together with other boards, that may achieve some of these goals themselves. Now, there are a couple of more slides after this slide. I'm going to turn it over to Stacy in just a minute here, but I do want to remind you that you guys are cool as regulators. FSBPT is your organization. I am way hoping that my remarks provided you with some ideas to enhance your communication and outreach efforts, to enhance the awareness of all of us involved in the regulatory community in a manner that is productive and constructive, so that consumers and others are well protected and know they have a place to go and ask questions. And when I say consumers, I should probably say the public is aware, because these questions may be just as important to ask by your licensees as well. So when I say public, that includes physical therapists, physical therapy assistants, consumers, and everybody else that we've talked about today. So with that short wrap up, if anybody has any questions or anything else, feel free to unmute and ask those. A couple of people are asking questions about acronyms, so I'm hoping to get answers there. But I will conclude my remarks with a gigantic thank you again to the board of directors, to your staff, but most importantly to each and every one of you who's on the line today and the important role that you play in public protection. I hope this last hour here was helpful to you. It was an hour you deem to be well spent, and I look forward to seeing perhaps some of the implementation of these ideas within each of your jurisdictions. So, Stacy, back to you. But if anybody wants to unmute or ask a question or type it in there, feel free to do so. But I'm going to mute myself, and Stacy, turn it over to you as well.
Thank you, Dale. I saw in the chat a comment from Sonora Simpson that said developing a buddy in the media to feed them info is great. And I just wondered if that's something, Sonora, that you've done, and how did you go about doing it? If you'd like to share that with us. And feel free to unmute, or you can put it in the chat.
Yes. Actually, most of my work has been with developing outside folk and getting information to them. When I say information, I'm not talking about personal information, but information about the profession, what it is we do, giving examples of how we work. And so I know that during a lot of times when a lot of our laws were coming up, I'm in the district. If I had not made that effort to get with the either the legislator, other people who are important in the field, there's always this very important people. And so you need to know who really is in charge in your area, and develop either friendship with them, but more likely for everybody, staffs run this country. And so we have to learn how to deal with the staffs, because we can give them our ideas and tell them what it is we're able to do. Most of the time, the legislature does not have an idea of what to do with us. So we can drive our efforts. And if you look at what the APTA wants the profession to go to, and then you can drive it that way. But for the new people coming on the board, I think just making sure that you have an orientation for all of your new people coming on a board. And it may seem like that that's not important, but it really is. And then giving them a buddy. So have somebody on the board that they can connect with if they have any question. But this whole business with the Federation and everything else, it really is about developing personal interactions, and where people know who you are, and they will learn what the board is. Because I am now 87 for everybody, and I still believe, and I'm living through, people have no idea what PT is. And so we have to sell it. And now that you'll see it on television a lot, but what I'm finding is that they're showing PT as sort of sex pots. I've just looked at one streaming thing where the PTs are having sex in the clinic. So we've got to do something to change the impression of what PT is, and that we're not, glorified trainers.
Thank you so much, Sonora. I appreciate you sharing that with us. I agree that it is necessary and important to engage our legislators and our power players, so to speak, in getting some initiatives moved. Another comment I put in the chat myself, that the cross-professional minimum data set is a good way to start. And for those of you who are not exactly certain what that is and where to find it, the information has been put in the chat. But and if you come to the annual meeting, which is coming up later this month, you will probably likely hear more information about that as well, as well as HRRI and how it all developed. But I would also like to share with you some other upcoming events. If you see on the slide there, we have more in our webinar series for the remainder of the year, all of the topics there. And we ask that you please register for some of those topics, particularly the educators workshop is coming up for some. We have the webinar there on emerging areas of practice and scope of practice. Information about for military spouses, which is something that has come up quite a bit in this last year, particularly since there was a federal law change as it relates to those, and much, much more. So please, please, please register for those. And then, of course, we want you to be ready for our annual meeting in Jacksonville, Florida. We hope to be able to see many of you there. You see some of the keynote speakers that are here on this slide. The annual meeting also is a awesome time to network, to learn of each other, learn from each other. And it is an opportunity to attend the awards ceremonies and other activities. So we encourage you to please come to the annual meeting, and you will not regret it. And thank you again for being here this evening. We really do appreciate you taking the time out to attend these webinars. We do love to educate you all, as well as to get an education from you all. So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in the upcoming events. Have a good evening.